Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated. Good afternoon, everybody. The House will now come to order, and we will continue with orders of the day. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will you please canvass the House to see if there's leave to move to second readings on bills number 62, 59, 58, 57, 56, 55, and 54 in that order?
So you just reverse. So we start. So it's just leave for second.
Is there leave for second reading of bills number 62, 59? Read it.
No, just for, is there leave for Bill 62?
Oh, is there leave for bills for second reading of Bill 62? Leave has been denied. Is there leave? Oh, the Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I apologize. I meant to say yes.
Okay.
Apologize.
So I will put the question again. Is there leave to do second reading of bill number 54? Is there leave? The emergency, sorry.
Let's do 62.
62. Is there leave to do second reading of bill number 62? Leave has been granted. Is there leave to do second reading of bill number 59?
No.
Leave has been denied. Is there leave to do second reading of bill number 58? Leave has been granted. Is there leave to do second reading of bill number 57? Leave has been granted. Is there leave to do second reading of bill number 56? Leave has been granted. Is there leave to do second reading of bill number 55? Leave has been granted. Is there leave to do second reading of bill number 54? Leave has been denied. So the Honourable Government House Leader has announced that we will now move into second readings, starting with bill number 62. So I will call bill 62, second reading, the Fuel Tax Amendment and Retail Sales Tax Amendment Act. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, second by the Minister of Education, that Bill number 62, the Fuel Tax Amendment and Retail Sales Tax Amendment Act, be now read a second time and to be referred to the Committee of the Whole. Her Honour Lieutenant Governor has been advised of the bill, and I table the message.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Finance, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Education, that Bill number 62, the Fuel Tax Amendment and Retail Sales Tax Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a Committee of the Whole. Her Honour, the Lieutenant Governor, has been advised of the bill, and the message is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it is my pleasure to introduce the bill number 62, the Fuel Tax Amendment and Retail Sales Tax Amendment Act, which implements the administrative and tax relief to Manitobans and business owners. These measures are part of our government's message, or measures to deal with COVID-19 pandemic. The bill, the Fuel Tax Act, by temporarily waiving the requirement for a single trip permit and the payment of the tax when acquiring the permits. This will reduce the administrative burden for motor transportation carriers, bringing vital supplies such as food, medical equipment, and other goods into the province during the state of emergency. The Retail Sales Tax Act is also amended by the bill to provide much-needed financial assistance to Manitobans by eliminating sales tax on residential and commercial properties. Eliminating the sales tax on residential property insurance is part of our 2020 tax rollback guarantee and has been expanded. We expanded it, Madam Speaker, to include commercial properties as an additional financial supports during the COVID-19. And on average, this will mean over $880 for businesses that they will not have to pay, small, medium-sized businesses, which is so important these days. These measures will save Manitobans close to $75 million annually. Madam Speaker, the measure contains in the bill reduces administration for carriers bringing vital supplies and also provides significant tax relief to Manitobans at a time when substantial tax relief is needed. Therefore, I encourage members of the House to support this bill.
A question period of up to 15 minutes will be held. Questions may be addressed to the minister by any member in the following sequence. First question by the official opposition critic or designate. Subsequent questions asked by critics or designates from other recognized opposition parties. Subsequent questions asked by each independent member. Remaining questions asked by any opposition members. And no question or answer shall exceed 45 seconds. The Honourable Member for Concordia.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to quickly begin by thanking all of those in our transportation industry who are doing such amazing work in ensuring that goods that we so rely on are safely transported and continue to be during this pandemic. My question is with regards to the changes issued under Section 6, subsection 2.2, with regards to single trip permitting. Wondering if the minister could give some clarification as to the need for that provision.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, it's a temporary measure that we're impacting. The temporary waiving of requirements to obtain a single trip permit will reduce red tape and administration for out-of-province motor transportation carriers, bringing vital goods and services to Manitobans in a time of need. We know that some out of town, there's some of the bigger firms that have a kind of a tax agreement in place. So this will allow a reduced red tape for small trucking companies that are going back and forth across the line. I think it's upwards of $18 for that single use. So it would allow them to transport back and forth important goods and services and reduce red tape in this time of need.
The Honourable Member for Concordia.
As I said, Madam Speaker, I think Manitobans have a newfound appreciation for the work that's being done in this sector, along with so many others that are often maybe overlooked. Again, I think Manitobans understand the need to ensure that transportation continues and that certain exceptions are made. I'm wondering if the minister could expand on what he means by red tape, what this bill pertains to with regards to those regulations and how that might impact the safety of the transportation of those goods throughout our province.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, we're waiving the administrative function, I guess I would say, in terms of red tape. We know we've got administrative staff that's here. So for small transporters that are looking to carry essential services back and forth, the bigger firms have an ability through kind of a tax gasoline sharing agreement where they don't have to apply for these things. There's a one-time usage, I think it's upwards of $18, that these smaller firms or carriers would have to cost. There's a cost savings to them as well as an administrative savings. They don't have to go through the red tape to apply for this, and we don't have administrative supports to do this. So this is impacted while the state of emergency is on.
The Honourable Member for Concordia.
Wondering if the minister, he had mentioned, I think he had said essential services, he may have meant essential goods. I'm wondering if there's a designation within this bill that would pertain to those, what goods are considered essential, or whether this is a blanket clause that would apply across the trucking industry and the transportation industry.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, obviously trucking is considered as a critical service for and transportation for the most part is considered natures, but this as relates to things like food or medical supplies, these are the types of items that we're referring to, but overarching it provides more of a global approach to this if transportation items are coming back and forth. Again, this doesn't impact the bigger players because they have a tax sharing agreement across provinces, but this will reduce red tape for smaller carriers as well as a little bit of administrative cost.
The Honourable Member for Concordia.
So I think I understand the cost element that the minister is trying to address with this legislation. My concern, of course, is with the safety and ensuring that there is some accountability to ensure that those goods that are being transported would indeed be essential, would indeed be necessary. Is this a delay that's being proposed here, or is it a complete waiver of all requirements for reporting by these smaller trucking firms? Could the minister offer some clarification?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a waiver while the time the state of emergency while we're under a state of emergency. So it's a waiver. They don't have to pay during the state of emergency happening in Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for Concordia.
And so is that, just to be again very clear about this, is that simply for the duration of the state of emergency that's been declared in this province, or is it in relation to the state of emergency extending beyond what the province has issued at the time that this bill would presumably receive royal assent?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Yeah, the temporary waiver will be in place for the duration of the state of emergency for COVID-19 pandemic. The measures are retroactive, so it starts on March 20th, 2020. The date of the state of emergency was proclaimed by the province. Should have a small impact on revenues for us. We're not worried about revenues as much. It's $54,000. But again, it is retroactive to that date when the state of emergency was done, and it is, again, a waiver.
Are there any further questions? The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the question of amendments to the removal of the PST on insurance, I know that we've spoken with many chambers of commerce and small businesses who are much more interested in direct help. I was wondering if the minister could explain or say who he's been received support from or who he consulted with before making this change.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, we've had ongoing discussions since the pandemic started with, for the most part, people in the business community. We've talked to a number of people from all different walks of life. We think that it's important, and what is important, and there were some discussions earlier on that somehow there wasn't a lot of financial support given to small, medium-sized businesses. We have deferred about $3 billion of taxes. This one measure, including the commercial component of it, will save on average business about $880. Again, $880 a year. So this is supports for small businesses that were there.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
We all know that averages are tricky things. If Bill Gates walks into a bar, on average everyone becomes a billionaire. It doesn't mean that that's the actual saving that each business will have. So, I mean, part of the concern here is that this will actually overly benefit large property owners, whether they're residential or commercial. Has there been any thought about the distributional impacts of this? I mean, the fact is that it means that some large operators will save much more than small and medium-sized businesses. Is this something the minister has taken into consideration?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
The way we calculated, there's about 60,000 businesses here in the province. About 42,000 commercial properties will benefit from this measure, saving each business, as I mentioned, about $880. You're absolutely right. It depends on how big, of how much savings they're going to have. I would also argue, though, bigger and smaller businesses, depending on how big a size you are doing this, has a bigger and smaller impact. So this is something that gives cash back, money that wouldn't be spent. And what is important about this is businesses may be deferring a whole bunch of costs, as they're probably doing, but probably deferring insurance is something that they're not going to do, because you don't want to be in an issue where you don't have insurance. So this will be a true cost savings for businesses.
The Honourable Member for Concordia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The minister referred to savings for corporations, for businesses. I'm wondering if he can just detail what the impact to the Treasury would be in terms of the loss of revenue for the province for making this change.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, I would put it the other way. I would say it's $75 million of tax savings for businesses and residents or individuals that are here. I think anyone that probably owns a house or other types of insurance, or businesses and commercial will benefit from this. So this is $75 million of cash on hand that businesses and residents won't have to pay. $75 million, it's around $36 million for the commercial side, and around the same amount, somewhat right around that amount for the residential side.
The honourable member for Concordia.
And as the minister mentioned, those corporations which are larger would benefit the most. Likewise, those who, I guess, pay the most in their home insurance would also benefit. Say if you had a seven-car garage and you needed to insure every single one of those spaces, that might be a very big savings for yourself and maybe less so for others. Again, if the minister can detail what the hit to the Treasury would be in terms of a loss of revenue, making these changes which benefit mostly the large corporations and, of course, those who have to insure some of the most expensive houses and homes in our city.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, on this side of the House, we don't consider government money, we consider the people's money and taxpayers' money, and that's why we're giving $75 million of tax support relief to residents. There's about 510,000 residents who will benefit from this, as well as close to 42,000 businesses. It's their money which they pay in. This is tax relief. We know businesses are struggling. We've deferred over $3 billion of tax relief for Manitoba businesses. This is going to put on average about $880 for residents, or rather for businesses, about $75 for each individual residence, a part of this tax measures.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know that there's been a lot of concern, and CFIB and other small business organizations have said that a huge number of businesses could be bankrupt within a month. So I'm just wondering if they don't get adequate rent support or support to actually pay their bills during this time. I'm just wondering if the minister is, his ministry has considered how many fewer businesses may be ineligible for this tax cut because they will be bankrupt by July 1st when it comes in.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, our government has taken strong action. In fact, over close to $3 billion tax relief for Manitobans, deferrals on a whole host of different things that are here. This item that we're talking about here will provide about $880 for every individual business that's there. We want to make sure that businesses have the support. There's some good programs. The wage subsidy program, which our government pushed to have it enhanced from 10% to 75%, we think will help. We think some of the EI programs that have been brought forward by the federal government is there, and we're trying to get the message out to make sure as many businesses as well as residents get the message and are able to get on these federal programs. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? If not, the floor is open for debate. The Honourable Member for Concordia.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is indeed an honor to rise today in this emergency session to speak to a bill which I think does address some of the concerns that we've heard with regards to transportation and trucking here in this province. I want to begin by just thanking all those folks who are out there continuing to keep the transportation system moving, to keep goods and services coming to our province, to allow all of us to be able to go to the grocery store and see full shelves. And as I said earlier, I think this is a time where maybe these are folks who do work that isn't always noticed or isn't always appreciated in the way that it should be. And this is, I think, an opportunity for all of us to show that appreciation, to say thank you to those folks who are continuing to work day in and day out on the front lines, so to speak, but in a way that's not quite as visible as those we see in our local grocery stores or in other places. So I want to thank them for doing that work. I also want to acknowledge that we did have an opportunity to speak to members of the Manitoba Trucking Association, to hear some of their concerns firsthand, to learn some of the challenges that they're seeing when they're out on the road, some of the challenges that they're facing when they're offloading goods or picking up shipments, and also to understand that in many cases, these are small owner-operated enterprises. So when we talk about small businesses, as we ask questions about here in question period today, those are some of the best examples of very small business, very small owner-operators who operate themselves as a business and who are probably some of the most impacted with regards to some of the downturn that we're seeing in the economy. Of course, we know that sales of certain things, such as toilet paper, continue to be strong, but other less important or less vital goods maybe are lessening. And so we want to understand those challenges. And we want to understand the challenges that the trucking industry is facing with regards to being out on the road and not having the same access to food, to restroom facilities, to rest facilities as they're moving across the country. This is a major problem, Madam Speaker, and it is one that I think needs to be paid some attention to. I also want to just acknowledge within this bill that there is, I think, an opportunity to see that anytime we can help some of those smaller either owner-operators or smaller trunking companies, some of which we have within our province, that anytime we can give them a leg up during this pandemic would be a good thing. And so I think there is a lot of opportunity to support that and to show our support as a legislature and as all Manitobans for those truckers and for the work that they're doing. That being said, Madam Speaker, I do want to highlight that this bill comes to us as a sort of hybrid bill, a sort of mishmash of different ideas, some of which apply, as I said, to the trucking industry, but some of which aren't quite as closely tied to it, and in fact, I would argue, really are different issues altogether. And we came into this legislative session, this emergency sitting, with a number of criticisms in the public of this government trying to use this time to push through agenda items that are not directly related to the COVID pandemic. And we came to this session, as I know our leader, the member for Fort Rouge, mentioned, in the spirit of working as Manitobans, not as partisans in the sense of our political affiliations, but really for what is the best for all Manitobans. And we truly come to this place in that spirit. However, when bills such as this come forward, it simply serves to highlight how this government is using this opportunity to push other agenda items, which in many cases have been announced previously, in some cases have actually come forward in the form of bills to this legislature, and in fact have received some attention and have received some debate. In this case, the government is using this opportunity to bring forward tax measures, which one would argue have very little to do with the current pandemic and the realities that Manitobans are facing. Manitobans are contacting our offices, concerned about their employment, concerned about their childcare situation. They're concerned about their small business, about how they're going to keep it afloat. These are all issues that are first and foremost on the minds of Manitobans, not to mention their own health and the health of their family and friends. These are what they're coming to us as the number one priorities. And yet this government has used this opportunity to talk about an issue, again, trucking, which we are now starting to all realize is so very vital when we're trying to keep our economy moving at a pace that it can, that is reasonable, but also to make sure that we have all the goods that we need in order to continue to be fulfilling our own needs in our own households. They use that opportunity to bring forward a bill which, let's be frank, Madam Speaker, basically favors those who have the most and have the best ability to weather this current pandemic. So in this case, as I said, if you have a $7 million home, you probably pay quite a bit of tax or quite a bit of insurance on that home, and you probably pay a tax on that. That is going to benefit you more so than the average person here in Manitoba who's just trying to make ends meet. Likewise, for corporations who pay their fair share in taxes when it comes to the PST and other taxes that they are eligible or required to pay, they also would be more benefiting the larger corporations. This is a concern, Madam Speaker, because while we're trying to find ways that we can support the average Manitoban, while we're trying to find ways to support the workers in this province, the government continues to focus only on giving tax relief to those who can most afford it. It is, I think, a very clear indication of where this government hopes this session will go. We, as the loyal, the official opposition, Her Majesty's loyal official opposition, I think I've got that right. I'm getting some.
Says you're doing great.
And we're doing our job here in this legislature to ensure that we're making sure that those concerns are coming forward. We will support those bills which benefit Manitobans. We will continue to work through this emergency in the spirit of cooperation. However, when there are bills that come forward, Madam Speaker, which do not directly address the concerns of Manitobans, we have no issue with standing strong, with standing together, and ensuring that those bills do not get pushed through under the cover of this pandemic. So with those few words, Madam Speaker, I do look forward to the rest of the day where we have an opportunity to speak to this bill again and others, and hopefully be able to put the views of Manitobans on the record, continue to push forward as an official opposition, and to hold this government to account in every opportunity that we have. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We've expressed our concern about this measure to the government House Leader, as well as to the government. It's simply that this, at a time when we're faced with large deficits and cutbacks, this measure would add $75 million in revenue losses. It means that we are borrowing to pay for, borrowing and to pay for a tax cut. The other is that it is not targeted in a way that will actually help the people who need it the most. That this is simply because when it comes to inequality, that the concentration of property ownership is even greater than the concentration of income inequality. That the vast majority, it means that there will be very substantial savings for a few very large property owners, while a few dribs and drabs are left for everybody else. And this is particularly a matter of concern, as I asked earlier. I asked the minister earlier, what the financial impact of this is going to be if thousands of small businesses have to close the doors between now and July 1st, which is a very real prospect, as we've heard from the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses and others, because the one thing that that small businesses need now more than anything else is not further deferrals, which will just pile up and mean that they have to be paid off in a couple of months, or essentially that those bills will continue to pay up, whether it's a tax deferral, whether it's a deferral in utilities, which means that many businesses will face an even greater burden when it comes to open, which is the exact opposite of what we need. I think I've already heard that there are many, that 1 in 10 restaurants across Canada has closed its doors permanently. And we did send out a request to all chambers of commerce in Manitoba, as well as biz groups across Winnipeg, to ask basically if there was an option between having $75 million used to provide relief on insurance, that people would much rather prefer a grant program, and there have been excellent grant programs in Saskatchewan and across Canada that are designed to essentially help businesses hibernate to be able to make it through this pandemic. And if I can, I would just like to read a few of the letters we received. This is from a business owner saying the current proposal by our government has nothing to do with helping small business. This isn't a change they're proposing for the pandemic. It's just something they had on their wish list to go along with their small, underfunded government ideology. It looks like the government is trying to move its pre-COVID agenda through the legislature without doing the hard work of finding current COVID-related needs. This is from a business owner from my constituency. Without any help financially, there will be a slaughter of restaurants, healthcare places, hair salons, independent coffee shops, and others forced to close due to the pandemic. Please help sustain our small business community and help us thrive after this pandemic, like the government is trying to move its pre-COVID agenda through the legislature. We also had many responses from rural Manitoba. One example said we could use support on fixed costs for our acknowledged tourist draw to our community in the Interlake. Once here, people will spend in 2 to 4 other businesses, thereby supporting a small community that relies to a large amount on summer into early fall tourism. If we all go into winter with no ability to open and earn some funds to support us through the winter months, there will be more casualties in small business in the community. As a registered nonprofit charity, we are an all-volunteer operation with no staffing costs, but we have fixed operating costs like rent, phone, etc. That was from Gimli.
Order, please. Order. As the member is reading from some actual letters that he received, does the member have 3 copies of each to table for the House? The Honourable Member for St. Boniface?
Yes. I do not immediately, but I can obtain 3 letters for tabling. I can obtain 3 copies for tabling if you wish.
If the member could do that this afternoon, that would be helpful then. The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And finally, as we had somebody who was in favour, in principle, of the removal of PSTN insurance as a business owner, however, said because of the pandemic, they would forgo it for 1 year until June 2021 and use the monies to support small business. Finally, from a rural small business owner, rural communities are made up of very small businesses that are predominantly run by one person, the owner, who usually doesn't pay themselves, to a maximum of 10 employees.
Order.
None of the announced financial support plans help any of the owners of these businesses. They need to start recognizing actual small businesses in rural areas and cities. We hope that this government will do that. We are not in support of this measure, but we certainly hope that the government uses some of the funds it has in order to step up and provide not loans, not deferrals, but actual grants to business in order to make sure that they can make it through this crisis. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any other members wishing to speak in debate? Is the House ready for the question? The question before the House is second reading of Bill number 62, the Fuel Tax Amendment and Retail Sales Tax Amendment Act. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. We will now move to Bill number 58, the Residential Tenancies Amendment Act, second reading. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, second by the Minister of Justice, that Bill number 58, the Residential Tenancy Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to the Committee of the Whole.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Finance, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Justice, that Bill number 58, the Residential Tenancies Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a Committee of the Whole. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill 58 is part of the province's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and state of emergency. This bill proposes to amend the Residential Tenancy Act to assist Manitobans who are experiencing financial hardship because of COVID-19. Tenants who have lost their jobs, laid off, work less or otherwise financially impacted by COVID-19 pandemic may not be able to pay their rents on time and will be at risk of eviction. Tenants may be in self-isolation in their rental units following the advice of the Chief Public Health Officer. Many tenants will be able to access federal government programs, but in the meantime, it is critical that tenants should not have to worry about having a roof over their heads, Madam Speaker. Bill 58 temporarily amends the Residential Tenancy Act to implement 3 measures. First, the landlords will be limited to issuing notices of termination or evictions effective March 24, 2020 to specific circumstances where a tenant is impairing safety and engaging in unlawful activities that pose an imminent risk to the health and safety of others. Second, to freeze rent increases, there will set to take effect as of April 1st. So again, April 1st and for the subsequent months while the amendments are in effect. Third, to prohibit charging late fees for non-paying rent on time effective April 1st, 2020 and for the subsequent months while the amendments are in effect. These measures remain in effect until the amendments are repealed by proclamation. This approach provides flexibility so that these measures can be adjusted as COVID-19 pandemic and its effects on Manitoba evolves over the coming months. By limiting a landlord's ability to issue notices of termination for urgent matters involving imminent risk or to the health or safety of an individual, this approach continues to balance the needs to support renters experiencing economic hardship, Madam Speaker, or who are self-isolating in their units due to COVID-19 with the safety concerns. While these measures are in place, landlords cannot issue notice of termination because the tenant has not paid their rent. The Residential Tenancies Branch is available to answer questions and to resolve urgent situations involving health and safety for landlords and
Order.
tenants, which could include a landlord illegally shutting off utilities or locking tenants out of their rental units, or a landlord dealing with this situation where a tenant is conducting illegal activities from their rental units. Madam Speaker, these proposed amendments are designed with one purpose in mind, which is to respond directly to the financial impact of COVID-19 for public health emergencies. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
A question period of up to 15 minutes will be held. Questions may be addressed to the minister by any member in the following sequence. First question by the official opposition critic or designate. Subsequent questions asked by critics or designates from other recognized opposition parties. Subsequent questions asked by each independent member. Remaining questions asked by any opposition members. And no question or answer shall exceed 45 seconds. The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Which, Madam Speaker, can the minister give us an indication of how long these rent freezes will last?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it really depends on how long the state of emergency happens and the COVID-19 crisis. No one truly knows at this point, but it is our intent to, while the state of emergency is on, is a good parameter.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Which, Madam Speaker, in addition to rent freeze, many renters are finding it difficult to pay for their rent at this time. Many people have lost their jobs due to COVID-19. What measures is the government offering to help renters pay for their rent?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, one of, I think, the crown achievements of the government since being elected is enhancement of the Rent Assist program, Madam Speaker. We know since coming to office, there's more than 3,000 people supported on the Rent Assist programs than when the former government was running the file. And so we think that's important to support renters. Those programs are in place. We think it's important to have supports through things like EIA as well as Rent Assist to support people in the time of need.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
I'm happy to hear, the minister say this. So I'm just wondering if they plan to increase EIA rates as well as rent assist to support the very people that he's talking about who have lost their job, that now have children home full time, and many of the social services that have supported families are no longer there.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, later on, I'm sure we'll be debating how much money appropriated to address the pandemic that we're having here with COVID-19, close to $1 billion. We know that's supportive. We know that there's going to be more people, unfortunately, having to take on EIA or go on to EIA after EI kind of programs are not there for them any longer. And so the government will be supporting these, as well as important programs like the Rent Assist program. The Rent Assist program is something that has pulled us from having the child poverty capital when the NDP were running the show to about middle of the pack. That's not good enough, Madam Speaker, but it's a vast improvement, and that's because of the program, the Rent Assist program that we pushed for when we were opposition and forced the government to do before getting on. Now 3,000 more people are supported under the Rent Assist program.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker, I just want to say thank you to the federal government for stepping up and actually increasing the child benefit to families in Manitoba and right across Canada so that we can make sure we're ensure, on their part that families aren't going hungry. But I'm going to ask the minister again. He talks about, we're going to see this budget come out, the extra funds that they're asking for. So I'm going to ask again how much is going to be allocated to increase rent assist to families, as well as increasing EIA benefits to families here in Manitoba.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And the member opposite is somehow trying to allude to the fact that the CCB, the Canadian Child Benefit, is the only reason why we pulled up from being worst in the nation in terms of child poverty capital. What experts will tell you, it's because of the Rent Assist program having over 3,000 more people that are supported. To answer your question, quite frankly, I don't know how many people will apply. You look at the number of people that applied for unemployment insurance just over the last month, it's over 25,000 people. So it really depends on how many people apply for these programs, but these programs are in place. In fact, the Rent Assist program is a program that the federal government is emulating in their national housing strategy, which we think is important.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you. So I think that the bill does introduce some valued changes that will protect renters, but I would like to ask the minister what kind of protections are being put in place for small business owners, property owners who might own a few homes whose revenues are going to be seriously impacted by ultimately the inability of some tenants to pay their rent. What kind of protections are being put in place for those small business owners?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, the opposition, of course, didn't have a lot of time for small businesses when they were in government, but I will say there is a number of programs that are in place. Number one, it's the CEBA program, the federal government program, where there's a $40,000 grant program. $10,000 is forgivable. If you talk to the Minister of Finance federally, Minister Marneau, I'm on call with him every Mondays. That is an important program. There's a lot of voices out there about a rent type of program. We've got over $1 billion allocated. Later on, we'll be debating, Madam Speaker, $400 million to address COVID-related issues. We're going to look at these things and try and fill the gaps where the federal government isn't in place.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What I heard the minister suggest, as with many things that we're seeing in response to this COVID emergency, is that the government is entirely reliant on federal dollars to support Manitobans. And I'd like to ask him again, is there any specific actions that his government will be taking to help small business owners who are being put in a precarious position as a result of this challenge?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, it's disappointing. I think someone from St. James generally has good common sense, but clearly he hasn't done his homework. He knows that later on today we're talking about $1 billion additional appropriation that we'll be talking about to support this, whether it's $500 million on things like healthcare costs, whether it's $400 million on enabling appropriations. What we've said is there's federal programs that are in place. We've done a number of items, including $1 billion of tax relief deferrals, which are important. We talked about tax relief for commercial insurance. That's going to mean about $820 for every person in terms of their insurance on a commercial property. These are just the start of the process, and we're going to fill the gaps in with the rest of some of the money we're being appropriated here this afternoon.
The honourable member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. I'd like to ask the minister why businesses actually weren't included in this rent freeze.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Sorry, I don't understand the question. Could you repeat the question?
The Honourable member for Point Douglas.
So businesses pay rent to landlords. They are exempt from this, which means their rent can go up and they would have to pay an increase. So I'll ask the minister, why weren't businesses' rents frozen as well?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, clearly we don't adjudicate. We're not in charge of business rents. That's between a private landlord and a tenant. That's a part of it. There isn't legislation that oversees that. What we can do, where we provide legislation, is through the residential tenancies. That controls in terms of the rent increases, that controls evictions. There isn't regulation that's in place that somehow could control commercial tenants.
The Honourable member for Point Douglas.
So what penalties are in place for landlords that charge an increase to tenants?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, that's not allowed under the residential tenancy. The legislation that's we're here before us does not allow for a landlord to increase. So suppose they have an increase that would take into effect April 1st. They're not able to charge that amount. And once we're out of this emergency situation and this act is proclaimed, and so it's not in place anymore in terms of the rent controls as well as evictions, they could increase the rents at that point, but they cannot retroactively go back and get the money in association with the timeframes we're talking about for the rent increase.
The Honourable member for Point Douglas.
My question was specific to penalties to landlords that do charge. I do see that this will become into law, but that doesn't preclude landlords from actually doing it. So again, I'll ask the minister, what penalties will landlords who decide to charge an increase will they receive?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
The residential tenancies branch, for the most part, they would retroactively have to pay that money back to a tenant that, for instance, had been charged this.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can the member tell us if there have been any evictions in the last month and a half, and if there have, how many?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
I believe there was over 100 people where evictions were in the process of happening once the government made the decision to put a hold or a halt on any rent increases as well as evictions. I think it might have been around 134. I'll have my officials verify that number, but it was a very low amount.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. What impact would this freeze have, if any, on condominium fees or condo owners?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, I'm going to just clarify something. I did get some information for officials that RBT will set the penalties for landlords if they increase the rent. So that answers the previous question. The RBC can set the penalties.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Okay, Miigwech. If the minister can go back and answer the last question I asked about impacts on condo fees for condo owners.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Condo fees would be separate from this legislation that's put forward.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. I want to ask the member, I had a couple of calls from constituents who have family members living with them. Their family members aren't on the lease, but they have nowhere to live. And there's more than 10 people living in a residence. And they've been given an eviction notice because they say that it's unsafe and it's making other tenants unsafe within the building that they're living in. So I'd like to ask the minister if that is a case where a family could be evicted, and if he agrees that those tenants are putting other tenants in an unsafe condition when they are just simply socially isolating within a unit.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
I don't have the details in the case. What we have put in place, if someone, for instance, I'll give you maybe a couple examples. Let's say there's aggressive nature, someone is fighting or causing some sort of criminal activity from happening, they can be evicted. If they're selling drugs, they're selling methamphetamine in these suites, they can be evicted for those types of things. If there's a certain particular case, we can take that back and have information, but that is the nature of things. We want to make sure we're freezing rents, and we're not allowing people to be evicted for those particular reasons. It isn't meant for other purposes but just mainly for criminal investigations, or if they're selling drugs or what have you within the parameters of their building.
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, I thank the minister for that clarification, because these very people are living in social housing that is managed by our province. So it's great to hear that they will not be evicted if they have extra family members socially isolating within their units. What supports will the government provide tenants to ensure that their rights are respected during this time?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, there's regulations as part of what this legislation we're building in. So again, if there was some rents that were scheduled to go up as of April 1st, even earlier on that, then they won't go up. And those rents will not go up for the duration of the legislation before it becomes proclaimed, or we proclaim the legislation, as well as other things like through eviction. So I guess what I would say is the parameters for this is pretty straightforward right in the legislative piece before us here. There is kind of questions and answers that is related to all of these aspects on the residential tenancies website that I encourage the member or people that are interested to peruse that and make sure they know all the responsibilities as well as all the rights.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know that I've heard from both renters as well as some small landlords who are facing challenges because they know that they won't, the landlords themselves who might own a single house are worried about being able to pay their bills. But as a bigger picture is, what is the exit strategy around this bill? Because if people can't pay their rent now, how are they going to be able to pay 2 or 3 months rent in 2 or 3 months' time?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
The intent of the bill is, while the emergency is going on through COVID-19, people are, sometimes what happens is they're either self-isolating or they're in a situation where their businesses have closed down. So this provides protection for that, a temporary protection that happens for individuals during that time period when we want to make sure people are supported. And so that's why we thought it is important to provide those assurances of not increasing the rent, as well as not allowing for evictions to happen because of COVID-19 related items.
Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, the floor is open for debate. The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
So first of all, I just want to commend the government on bringing this forward, although I don't think that it went far enough to support our renters here in Manitoba. What we're hearing from Manitobans is that they don't have the income to be able to pay their rent. They're being forced to negotiate with landlords, which is putting them in predicaments where we're getting emails and asking for some help in terms of negotiating. And this government has the authority, and they're going to be talking about a money bill later that could potentially support and go beyond a rent freeze and help thousands of Manitobans who have lost their jobs and are unable to pay their rent. Many Manitobans live paycheck to paycheck in this province, including, in my very riding, and I know Union Station's riding as well, and I am sure many across the other way as well, that have people who have reached out to them that have said, I've lost my job, I don't have an income coming in, $2,000 from this emergency response from the federal government is not enough. We know that rents are high here in Manitoba. A rooming house, for instance, is over $500, and that's just for a room, and you're living communally and putting yourself at risk by having to use a bathroom with other people and having to cook in a kitchen with other people. So I've also had people reach out to say that they have autoimmune deficiencies and they're afraid and they can't move because this is the only amount of money that they're allowed within rent assist. So, I think this government can be responsible and they can provide some extra rent assist to families that are already receiving rent assist. And I know the Minister of Families would know that what people receive on EIA right now doesn't allow for families to have adequate housing unless they're living in social housing, and they often have to top up their rent beyond rent assist and what EIA allows. So, the government can go further in supplying some extra rent assist as well as some extra assistance to EIA. This government's used today to push through their legislation. I was coming in here to talk about supporting Manitoba families and getting funds to Manitobans that need it. We have so many businesses that have had to shutter their doors that, and I see the MLA one across the way, waving that she's probably had to do the same. And, my heart goes out to those people who have had to do that don't have the capacity to bounce back from this, that are going to have to, declare bankruptcy because they don't have a rainy day fund that they can just, pull some money out. So I want to, just say that we came in a spirit of, really wanting to do what's right for Manitobans, and we were elected, as leaders in this province to lead the way, and here we are in a pandemic, and we have bills that aren't even related to COVID-19, that aren't directly, financially providing support to families. So, what do I say to my constituents and all of the emails that I've got over the last couple of days since, Manitobans have found out about this, and they have a right to know what exactly we're doing in this building. And, You know, we should be talking about what can we do to support our families here in Manitoba? What can we be doing to support our workers here in Manitoba? What can we be doing to support our businesses? But instead, you know, we're having to talk about legislation that has nothing to do with COVID-19. So I'm going to go back again and just say that Manitobans need more support other than a rent freeze. And, you know, at the end of this, people that aren't able to pay their rent, once this rent freeze is lifted, are going to be evicted anyway because they're not going to be able to pay their excess rent that they're in debt for because they have no job. And then that goes on their record and they may have debt collectors coming after them. So this province, this government should be providing some more assistance to Manitobans, and we should be in this House talking about direct financial assistance to those who need it in Manitoba. Miigwech.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the issue of ensuring people aren't evicted during a pandemic was something that many people brought forward. This is something that Manitoba Liberals urged the government to do, so we're glad that they picked up on it. Of course, there are challenges. I'm sure, as for every single MLA in this House, because of the urgent need for quick action and for major action during this crisis, that often every time, what I've found is that every time the government has offered to solve a problem, it often creates 2 or 3 more and many questions from constituents, people who are working, business owners who are extremely concerned about the unintended consequences and implications of what a new measure would be. This is certainly one of them. One of the things that we're doing in this pandemic is shutting things down, isolating ourselves so that we don't transmit an illness. And one of the things we need to consider when we're talking about the economy is that it's not about shutting down the economy. It's about making sure that we don't pass on costs and failures to everybody else, but we're actually making sure that money continues to flow through the economy. So I do think it's absolutely critical that some form of rental assistance is on the table at some point, whether it's part of the package that we're going to be talking about later on today, but for both, for small businesses and for individuals, simply because if we have a situation, essentially it'll create a domino effect where that all those people not paying their rent, or not able to pay their rent, can affect small landlords who will then be unable to pay their bills. And I had that exact call from a constituent who was really quite concerned and desperate because the fact that utilities will not be shut off means that, which he is responsible for as a landlord, he said, look, if his tenants aren't able to pay the bills and he can't pay his bills, he'll be the one who's blamed when utilities are shut off. Now that's been lifted as well, which is critical. But the fact is that we have to do more to continually supply and continually replace the money that's being lost into the economy, not all of it, but some of it, so that we're not having renters go bankrupt or go further into debt. We're not having landlords and small businesses go further into debt. I do think that one of the huge challenges of this crisis is that there is already so much debt, and that, as the Premier himself has said many times, that half of Manitobans are teetering on the verge of insolvency. And that's because their incomes haven't gone up for a long time, and their debts are so high. And it could be credit card debt, student loan debt, household debt. It's a huge problem because so many people, there are tens of thousands of people who are going to find themselves unable to pay their bills. And we're looking at something much more serious. So it's absolutely critical for that money to keep flowing. This is a positive. The decision not to evict people, to suspend evictions, is obviously critical as a public health measure, but we're dealing with two twin challenges, enormous public health challenges as well as enormous economic challenges. And it's absolutely critical that this money keep flowing. We do hope that the government will bring forward some measures to assist beyond EIA, beyond rent assist, because I know that even with rent assist, the government has taken some measures to raise the income threshold, which is actually in some cases reduce the number of people who are eligible for rent assist, and certainly EIA. In some cases, we're looking at 27 or 28 years since there have been an increase in rates, and with the average apartment in Manitoba going for over $1,000 a month for a single apartment, rent is completely unfeasible. So part of what we need to focus on, I believe, and we're more than happy to work with government on doing this, is to make sure that we're not just preventing the transmission of sickness, but preventing the transmission of economic failure, which is absolutely critical at this time. We do think that one of the issues is around when this will expire, or when the government should pull back on this, or lift this suspension of evictions. We do want to make sure that that doesn't happen too soon, that it's important that people are able to return to work and go to work and earn money before that happens. So we would like to consider that should be part of the bill, that there should be specifics around when it's going to be, about when it's going to be lifted, and that it not be lifted too soon. And that's it. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Are there any further members wishing to speak on debate? If not, is the House ready for the question? The question before the House is second reading of Bill number 58, the Residential Tenancies Amendment Act. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed. Agreed, and so ordered. Moving on now to second reading of Bill 57, the Regulated Health Professions Amendment Act. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Justice, that Bill number 57, the Regulated Health Professions Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to Committee of the Whole.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Health, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Justice, that Bill number 57, the Regulated Health Professions Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a Committee of the Whole. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's my pleasure to stand in the House today on a very, very unique day of sitting, possibly one of the most unique days in the 9 years that I've served in this legislature, but to rise for the purpose of passing essential legislation, and doing so because of the threat that faces all of us as Manitobans, and that threat being COVID-19. And all Manitobans know today the extraordinary challenges facing us. I have said publicly and privately that we are seeing these prolonged and significant encroachments into the way that we normally live our lives, and it's not normal. And people know it's not normal, but it takes a toll. It takes a toll when you drive through the streets and see parking lots that should be full of cars and they're closed. It takes a toll when you drive past an arena or a swimming pool and see the parking lot's empty. It takes a toll when you go past the local library, or you go past a shopping center and it's all closed and shuttered, and people are at home, and it takes a toll. People have lost their income. They've had their hours reduced. They have children at home who should have been in school. They have university students, children returning to their homes, and university students are college and university students significantly put out of their normal schedules. Interruptions to what those summer plans would have looked like for those individuals. And so many more other interruptions that we have become aware of. And in the middle of that, though, we have a government who is acting, who has acted promptly, who is heeding the advice of the Chief Public Health Officer in Manitoba, taking actions to protect Manitobans, taking actions to protect people's livelihoods, taking actions to stop the spread of COVID-19, and to do what we can to flatten the curve. And Madam Speaker, I can tell you that in Manitoba, it is still early days, because we did not have the evidence here of COVID-19 as early as places like Ontario and Quebec and BC had it. That is in some ways for us a benefit, because we were able to look and to liaise and to correspond with those jurisdictions and to take measures more promptly in this jurisdiction than otherwise might have been the case. And we have done that as a government. We have taken those steps. And we have limited travel. and we have reduced the ability of people to move around. We've closed non-essential businesses. We have closed schools and universities and workplaces, and it is having some effect. Time is still needed to understand what the efficacy of these measures have been. Nevertheless, today we are here in order to pass necessary legislation that will form part of our government's response, of all Manitobans' response on COVID-19. I take the time to say that twice for a reason, and I will revisit that in just a moment. On this bill, on Bill 57, Madam Speaker, suffice it to say that these proposed amendments to the Regulated Health Professions Act is part of that response of our government. We need our healthcare workers, and we need them now. We never miss an opportunity as a government to say thank you to the frontline workers who are on that front edge of our fight on COVID-19. And regardless of what fiction it was that the the opposition critic was trying to peddle earlier in their question period opportunity, the first opportunity they had in 2 months to be in this place and ask questions, the fact of the matter is this, that we say thank you at every opportunity for Manitobans. I also reflect on the fact that that same member took an opportunity on Twitter a couple of weeks ago to suggest that I didn't care because I didn't have family members who were in health care. Madam Speaker, I have to tell you, every time they have the opportunity to go up, they go down. Madam Speaker, we're so disappointed that when we see other jurisdictions where legislators are actually putting aside partisan attacks and coming together and collaborating, we get lip service from this leader of the opposition who says they want to participate. And then they go into the hall and they leak the entire day's order paper. They leak all the information. Information trusted to them by the government. The opportunity for them to step up and actually do the right thing. And what do? They suggest that somehow we don't care about health care because we don't have our family members in health care. Let me set the record straight, Madam Speaker. I have home care workers in my family. I have nurses in my family. I have laboratory technicians in my family. And so does that member, and so does that member, and I bet so do they. So shame on that member.
Shame. Sit in your shame. Enjoy it. Look at you guys. What a shame.
Order.
The leader of the opposition tells me not to engage. Well, sometimes I think that's good advice. But sometimes I think that that kind of foolishness has to be confronted. And I confront it today in this place. Madam Speaker, this bill seeks to extend very reasonable measures in our healthcare system to help us to get the healthcare workers that we need back into the workforce. The fact is this, right now in Manitoba, we have the ability for regulatory bodies to be able to waive registration and practice requirements for health professionals who would be coming back to the province from other provinces and territories and also from the United States. However, what we do not have in the Act is the ability to waive or modify registration or to be able to invite back those former healthcare workers when they were formerly in the profession and now they are not. So they are in Manitoba. They were at one time in the profession, now they are no longer in the profession. So we find that our Regulated Health Professions Act stops short of where other provinces would see that legislation extend to. So we see this as the opportunity to fix this. Why? Because we need the healthcare workers now. We are proud as a government that we actually were able to, weeks ago already, work in collaboration with the regulatory body for nurses to be able to create the conditions to welcome back into the profession former nurses. So there was an order created at that time as a mechanism. But this is the better mechanism, which is amendments that would be appropriate to fix the issue not just once, but for all time. Now, I would indicate that these amendments would also come then with the ability for the minister to impose conditions on that authority given to health professional bodies. What kind of conditions would these be? Well, they would be reasonable ones that were informed by our dialogue with the regulatory bodies. In other words, if time is of the essence, then maybe in certain cases there would be an ability to accommodate certain things that in a very formal, conventional process would not be accommodated. Things like, that if they were in good standing in their profession, if it was sought to be the case that there was a certain time period placed on the former member's participation in that professional field. Well, these would be things that could be also imposed by the minister. I would also say that there could be, in certain cases, declarations by the applicant to come back into the workforce, whereby before there might have been very formal checklists and documents that had to be submitted. So those things, of course, would be done, competency requirements, the need for ongoing professional education, those things would be done with the collaboration of the regulatory body. But I think that in the end, what we're saying is we want nurses to come back into the workforce. We want former doctors to come back into the workforce. If there are lab technicians, if there are allied health workers, now is the time for those individuals to come back into profession, and for certain of those professions, this is the mechanism by which we can expedite their ability to come back into that profession. Still, with protections, and of course I would say, of course at the end of the day, it would be the college that would be responsible to ensure the safety of these things, and they would do that. We have been in contact with the colleges, with the College of Pharmacists, the College of Registered Nurses, the College of Physicians and Surgeons in Manitoba, and all of those conversations are in place. So we see this as very reasonable amendments. We see them as very, very central to our efforts to combat COVID-19. I would want to update all House members and indicate that I received new information today that indicates that since June, this government has hired almost 400 nurses into the profession. I've reflected in this place that at one time the opposition party kept saying that we were removing nurses, and the fact is that we've hired almost 400 new ones just since June, and even while they chirp across the aisle, we still have plans to bring additional nurses into the workforce. It's why we created a portal, Madam Speaker, even to solicit interest from others to come back into Manitoba to help. So, I will end with the following. I believe that all members of the government side were shocked to hear earlier this afternoon the Leader of the Opposition say that they're here to help, and they're here to assist the efforts on COVID-19. And only moments ago, the opposition blocked second reading debate of what I would consider to be a companion piece to this legislation, which would be the Public Health Amendment Act, Bill 59. And we're shocked to think that in this legislation are measures that would enable the Manitoba Chief Provincial Public Health Officer to protect northern Manitoba from the spread of COVID-19 by creating the ability to create in the jurisdiction of Manitoba certain limitations on travel for non-essential purposes to regions that could be vulnerable. And I just heard the member for Point Douglas speak moments ago about protecting vulnerable Manitobans. And here is their opportunity to protect the North. Where is the member for where is the member for Thompson? Where is the member for Kiewitna? Where are these members? Why are they not standing up right now? I'm not reflecting on
Order. 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 The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a point of order.
Yeah, just a point of order. The minister there referred to the presence location of a number of members in the chamber, and I would just like to remind the House that that is not permitted under the rules.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
I'm happy to restate,
on the
Madam
same
Speaker.
point of order.
I'm happy to restate, Madam Speaker. I didn't reflect on the presence or absence of members in the chamber. I'm saying, in principle, why are the members for Thompson not standing up, the members for the PAW standing up, the members for Kiewitna not standing up?
Order. This is, actually this is turning into debate, and points of order aren't supposed to be used for points of debate. So I would indicate that probably order. considering the measures that have been put in place today, where we are looking at a decreased numbers of members in the House, and by agreement, those numbers were based on a calculation of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So I would indicate that, 1/3, 1/3, and 1. And 1/3, yes. But I would just urge caution. I don't think that was a point of order because there wasn't a specific reference to people not being here. But I would caution members that it's probably not in anybody's best interest to make reference about members in the House that may be here or not here just because of the way we have set up the House today. So I would just urge caution in members bringing forward that type of information for debate. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, let me rephrase. I am shocked that the members of the NDP caucus who represent areas of the North did not see fit to stand up against the actions of the House Leader and their opposition leader.
Order. 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 The official opposition House Leader was rising on a point of order? Or the Honourable Leader of the official opposition was rising on a point of order?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Earlier today, one of the leave requests that we considered off the top contemplated limiting the amount of members in the chamber, at which point there was unanimous consent. Given that measure was in itself put into place to ensure that we can ensure physical distancing and social distancing, and I would add to the fact that it received unanimous consent of the House, I would suggest that no member be able to be permitted to try and weigh in or use the provisions of that leave request to try and score some sort of point in debate. It was an important all-party agreement. It does serve to advance both the government's interest as well as our own function as the opposition to be able to have that request in place. And so I'd simply ask that members be instructed to refrain from even trying to take advantage of that, as it does violate the spirit of the rule, which prohibits us from referring to the presence or absence of members in the chamber.
Maybe look at your House.
The Honourable Minister of Health on that same point of order?
Not on the point of order.
Okay, I'm going to take the leader's suggestion and indicate that we do move in that direction where we are not making references to whether members are here or not. And just caution members in debate that there be no references to members here or not here, and focus more on the issue that is before us rather than getting into any further arguments about who's here and who's not here. So I just urge caution to all members, and that we refrain from getting into debate on this issue. There are significant issues that we need to deal with this afternoon, so just a caution to members. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, let's try this one more time. There is a members of the Legislative Assembly constituency information sheet. It lists 3 NDP members from outside of Winnipeg. One is the member for Thompson, one is the member for Kiwatamik, and one is the member for the Pawcamasac. And what up? Madam Speaker, there are 3 members who represent in this House areas of Northern Manitoba. There are. In the NDP caucus. No one is reflecting on their absence or presence in the chamber today. I'm saying they are elected to serve their constituents. Regardless of where they are today, they are...
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a point of order.
Yes, and it is a similar point of order to one that I have previously raised on 2 previous occasions and that I believe you ruled on. Again, and I'm sharing this piece of background simply for your consideration, Madam Speaker. I believe that the spirit of the rule, which prevents us from being able to reflect on the presence or absence of a member in the chamber, the spirit of that rule is so that we wouldn't potentially name somebody's constituency or portfolio at a time at which they could not fairly respond, either during debate, question period, or some other procedure of this House. Seeing as how we have previously agreed by unanimous consent to leave provisions limiting the number of members here today, I do think that what the minister is trying to rephrase multiple times violates the spirit of that rule in the House, because there may be members who are prevented by the leave provision that he and his party have agreed to from being here, and therefore consequentially are not able to stand in their places and either respond, defend themselves, or maybe add relevant information to the record. So I'd ask for some direction, simply for the minister to perhaps abandon this line of inquiry.
The Honourable Government House Leader on the same point of order.
Madam Speaker, I've listened carefully to the comments by the Minister of Health and the Leader of the Opposition, who continually refers to people's absence in the House, Madam Speaker. But that is certainly not coming from the Minister of Health. His comments, in particular his last comments, were specific about the actions and the previous statements by a particular member. All of us are held accountable for the things that we do or don't do in this House or not in this House. I've been held accountable by members opposite many times about what I've said or not said. That isn't fair to speak about the actions of a former member not attached to their absence or presence. That takes away a significant ability to have debate, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park on the same point of order.
Yes, Madam Speaker, on the same point of order.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Can I suggest that we just get back to debate?
And I'm going to agree with the member for Tyndall Park. I think I have made enough comments on this already. I have given direction to the House, and I would ask the Minister of Health not to make reference to those particular members. I understand that he was not indicating presence or absence, and so that isn't a order. So it isn't a specific point of order because there was no reference to their absence or presence. But by bringing that into debate here, it is inflaming the debate, and we're moving off the focus of what needs to be before the House. So in order to encourage everybody to move forward on this important legislation, I would ask that this particular topic, which I have commented on now a few times, be left, and that we move on to the specifics of this particular legislation. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, in any caucus there are both rural and urban members except for the Liberal Party. Not reflecting on any of those members, but some reside in rural and some reside in urban. Today, the NDP blocks debate on Bill 59, which would allow the Chief Provincial Public Health Officer to create protections for people who live in northern Manitoba that would appropriately curtail the ability for people to travel for non-essential reasons to the north. This is the bill that the NDP leader and House leader are blocking, reflecting on no one's presence or absence. I would submit that an MLA who lives in the north would have an interest in the actions of this opposition leader and House leader. And I imagine whether those individuals, who shall not be named suddenly, are in this House or not in this House, it matters. Madam Speaker, there are rules of this House that would allow this party to get the information if they had questions. They could have used question period today to ask specific questions about the bills that had just been introduced in this House. The opposition party could have allowed these bills to come to second reading to hear about the bills. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, there's a question and answer period that now forms part of our legislative debate process that was only entered into by agreement about 3 years ago that would have allowed them 15 minutes for pointed questions on any concerns they had about the bills. This bill is designed to accompany the Federal Quarantine Act and allow the provincial public health officer to also to create appropriate provisions to ban people coming back to Manitoba from other provinces or territories to go home, to self-isolate. And today the NDP has said that doesn't matter. Today the NDP is saying they don't need to be kept safe. Today the NDP is saying no one has to follow the Chief Provincial Public Health Officer's orders because they won't allow them to pass them. If the NDP had allowed second reading debate, they would have allowed me to say that Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and BC have these provisions under their Public Health Act to allow the chief to do these things. So let us understand that the NDP today could have stood on the side of democracy. They could have respected the rules of this House, but more importantly, they could have done what they said they were going to do. They said they wanted to partner. They said they wanted to cooperate. They said they wanted to hear COVID-19 specific bills. The member for Point Douglas 20 minutes ago said she took umbrage with one of the finance ministers. Can I name the finance minister? I hope I can name the finance minister. The finance minister who may or may not be in the House. She took umbrage with the finance minister complaining that we should be focused today on bills pertaining to COVID-19. And the same party that says that 20 minutes before prohibited Bill 59 to advance to debate where all of their questions could have been answered. Madam Speaker, I cannot fail to express my exasperation and outrage on behalf of all Manitobans who have been doing their part, who have been staying home, who have been self-isolating, staying home from work, foregoing their wages, foregoing their children's entertainment, and they have been complying. And they have been cooperating. And we thank every Manitoban for their cooperation and their compliance. Let us understand that even while they sit across the aisle now and heckle and laugh, they know the truth, and the truth is this, that it is they who are not complying and they who are not cooperating with Manitobans. And I think they have done a disservice today to all Manitobans. Madam Speaker, I commend Bill 57 to you. I think it is worthy of debate today. I only wish I could also be commending Bill 59 for debate in this House today.
A question period of up to 15 minutes will be held. Questions may be addressed to the minister by any member in the following sequence. First question by the official opposition critic or designate. Subsequent questions asked by critics or designates from other recognized opposition parties. Subsequent questions asked by each independent member. Remaining questions asked by any opposition members. And no question or answer shall exceed 45 seconds. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Other jurisdictions have set out restrictions on how long individuals can be out of practice in order to return to practice. It appears that in Manitoba, colleges are setting out their own requirements around this. I'm wondering, though, if the minister can let us know if he's had any conversations with colleges to ensure that each of these folks are, and by folks I mean colleges rather, are setting out reasonable guidelines around that specific criteria.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Yes, I have had these conversations with the regulatory bodies. I have no concerns that they are not proceeding in good faith and setting reasonable limits for the return of these people to the profession.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for bringing forward the bill. I do have a question. I represent the constituency of Tyndall Park, and I know in Tyndall Park we have a very high population, for example, of the Filipino community. A lot of people who have immigrated from the Philippines, they have a background in healthcare. They worked as nurses and physicians in the Philippines. they've continued on as home care here in Manitoba. Will the minister consider broadening his legislation to allow healthcare workers from other countries, aside from Canada and the United States, to also be able to bring their hands on deck while we need them most?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
I thank the member for Tyndall Park for the suggestion. The member and all members of this House know that the issue of acknowledging and licensing internationally graduated medical professionals into Canada is a tricky one. It is a long-standing issue of engagement to understand what the credentialing is, what the training is in those jurisdictions. I can tell the member I've had these conversations as well with the regulatory body in respect of this bill, understanding that this question would probably arise today. I can also say I have noted with interest that some other jurisdictions have been making some forays into this. I have yet to see any Canadian jurisdiction granting the ability to license without creating strong parameters around that. I think that for the scope of today's debate and today's legislation, it is simply a bridge too far to contemplate. But we welcome everyone to come back in as volunteers and assist our healthcare efforts during COVID-19.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can the minister answer whether or not the regional health authorities will be providing any type of training for the healthcare professionals that will be returning to the field to practice?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
So these are individuals who have been in the profession and who have only exited more recently, as the last question articulated as well. In that case, we have had the conversations with the regulatory bodies about what kind of training, if any, and in this case, they're saying that because this is a limited re-engagement in the profession, that they are willing to monitor and then to make modifications as required for things like ongoing practice requirements. So it is the basis of the extent to which they were in good standing with the profession, their interview, other paperwork that would be processed that would give people that high level of confidence they would need to have these people re-engage in their profession.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can the minister provide information around specific areas where the health professionals who re-enter the field will be returning to work specifically?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
I would say to the member that they would be returning to the field all across the province, wherever they are needed in our response to COVID-19.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Can the minister identify any specific areas that have been flagged as having greater need for folks re-entering the workforce in this capacity?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, I would say that looking across the globe at places like Hubei and North Italy and Spain, New York, Portland, Oregon, and others causes us to believe that we must do everything we can to be able to slow the spread of the virus, but clearly there is an impact on our healthcare system. So while today we would assess the system and say that we have capacity, it all depends on the trajectory of COVID-19 in jurisdiction. So we continue to say that we need a broad array of healthcare professionals at each level to be able to assist our efforts, because we do not yet know what the level of impact will be in Manitoba.
Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, the floor is open for debate. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first, I would like to thank the Minister and the government for bringing this legislation forward. I do think it is, especially in this time, critically important that we have the support of as many healthcare professionals as possible, recognizing that we very well may need their expertise in a number of areas during this pandemic, and hopefully in Manitoba we don't see that need. We hope in Manitoba that we flatten the curve, we all do our part, we stay at home, stay in place, practice physical distancing, self-isolation and self-quarantining when needed and necessary. We follow public health orders and keep our groups and our numbers to what they should be in order to limit the transmission of the virus. But certainly it is a good measure to introduce a way to make easier for healthcare professionals to be able to enter the workforce as healthcare professionals should that time come. I'd like to also thank the Minister, Madam Speaker, for his efforts during this pandemic. I can only imagine around-the-clock efforts to ensure that things are coming together as they need to, and I certainly want the Minister to know that I appreciate his efforts. I can only imagine how hard he's working during this time, as are so many other folks within the system. I'd like to also extend a thank you to all of our healthcare workers. Thank you to our Chief Public Health Medical Officer, Dr. Bruson, and our Chief Nursing Officer, Lynette Siragusa, who continue on a daily basis in whatever capacity folks are working to ensure that Manitobans have access to all the information that they need in order to keep themselves safe and healthy and informed and alleviate the anxieties that many people, I'm sure including members of this chamber, experience related to this global pandemic. Madam Speaker, I think it's really important for me to address comments made by the Minister in regards to my amplification of the voices of Manitobans who have been expressing concerns, and to also speak to a comment made by the Premier earlier in this chamber. I find it, to be completely honest with you, confusing. I am the critic for health, Madam Speaker. It is my responsibility within being elected in this role to amplify the concerns and also the criticisms of all of our constituents. And during this global pandemic and before this global pandemic, as the critic for health, as the representative for Union Station, people have brought forward concerns to me in regards to decisions made under this and by this government and by this health minister. It would be irresponsible of me as a critic for health and as a representative for Union Station to not amplify their voices and ensure that their voices are heard, their concerns acknowledged, and that we're working collectively to do whatever we can to address that. Madam Speaker, I find it incredibly problematic that the Minister would attempt to assert that I would in any way, shape, or form believe that any member of this chamber doesn't care about the constituents of Manitoba. In fact, Madam Speaker, my efforts to ensure that their voices and concerns are heard and their needs met reflect the exact opposite. They indicate that I do, in fact, believe and know that every member of this chamber cares and that I respect the constituents of this province. And I feel it's very, very important and critical to put on the record. And Madam Speaker, as the person elected in this role for Union Station and as a critic for health and seniors and active living, I will absolutely continue to do that work. I will absolutely continue to use every platform to my avail, including that of social media, to ensure that people have access to the information and the resources they deserve as Manitobans to have access to. Madam Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge that this bill is being brought forward because we know that healthcare workers do, whether they're in practice or not actively under their licensure, they do what they do best. They help people, Madam Speaker. I think it's so fundamentally important for us to acknowledge that the reason why we are supporting this bill is in fact because of the outstanding values that lie with all of our healthcare workers, our nurses, our frontline service providers, who would, of course, during a global pandemic, who would, of course, when it's their health and the health of their families and their loved ones who would be at risk by going into environments where COVID-19 exists, that of course they would be the ones to stand up, raise their hands, and answer that call for assistance from their fellow healthcare workers and Manitobans, Madam Speaker. And so again, I reiterate my thank you to those people who have expressed their desire to re-enter the workforce under their license. I would like to thank the colleges for working very hard to do whatever they can to make that process expedient and as easy to navigate as possible for those who would like to do so. It is certainly a collective effort to ensure that we have the resources in place to continue to battle this virus and this global pandemic that we're seeing impact so many people absolutely everywhere in the world, and over the last several weeks right here in Manitoba. And with that, I'd like to express my condolences to the families and the community members and the friends of those who unfortunately have lost their lives to this very terrible virus. And I extend my care and my best wishes and my love, Madam Speaker, to all those who are currently battling COVID-19, who have family members who are in hospital due to COVID-19, And I express my tremendous amount of gratitude to all of those folks who are working in non-for-profits, who are working in charities, who are working day in and day out, Madam Speaker, within the confines of the realities of this global pandemic and the measures that are in place to help keep us all safe, but continue to do work to ensure that, and whether it's nurses or healthcare aides, or like I said, folks working in community organizations, working with very limited resources and very little assistance from this government, quite frankly, who continue to deliver critical services to those who most need it, to those Manitobans who are targeted, who are marginalized, and who are without the capacity and the resources to do what many of us take for granted, and that is follow public health protocols to the letter, self-isolate and quarantine when deemed important to do so or necessary to do so. That is, to practice social distancing and physical distancing, to go to the grocery store only once a week, to make decisions to keep ourselves and our neighbors safe, and doing so with ease because we have the capacity and the privilege of being able to do that without really having to overthink it. I commend the frontline workers who work within those community organizations who are doing this work to ensure that all Manitobans have what they need in order to keep themselves safe during this pandemic and to hopefully negate ever experiencing COVID-19 personally in terms of their health and the health of their loved ones. I'd like to acknowledge, I've heard from a number over the past handful of hours, really I guess 24 hours or so, maybe less than that, Madam Speaker. I've heard from a number of people in that sector who are very, very concerned about recent announcements from this government. And I want those folks to know that we value their work, their expertise, and their contributions to the safety of all Manitobans in this province. And I believe it's on all of us to work collectively to ensure that every single person who is putting themselves at risk, Madam Speaker, to ensure that the wellness of all Manitobans is maintained, that we work collectively to ensure that those folks are protected, that they are lifted up, that they are acknowledged, they are respected, and they are equipped, Madam Speaker, to do not only their jobs, but to take care of their health and the health of their families. That is a collective responsibility that we share, and it's a collective responsibility that is beyond just this legislation in Bill 57, which we support. It is a collective responsibility in other pieces of legislation, which I'll have a chance, I think, to speak to later, Madam Speaker. So just a few other comments I'd like to make on this particular bill, Madam Speaker. I just want to again thank our healthcare workers. I want to thank all of those folks who are re-entering the workforce in order to help during this global pandemic. And I hope that after this pandemic passes and we get through this collectively as Manitobans, that we do more than thank our healthcare workers, that we do more than just thank our nurses, that we take action and informed decisions are made in this chamber that see choices made like no longer having their wages frozen, like no longer having them work exorbitant mandated hours of overtime, like no longer delaying the opportunity for them to access personal protective equipment under their decision making and their expertise in order to keep themselves safe. Madam Speaker, we need to do more than just thank them. We need to action what they're saying they need. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I too just want to echo a couple of the remarks that the member from Notre Dame made. Those were wonderful remarks and very, very well said. Madam Speaker, we will be supporting Bill 57 in that it waives registration and practice requirements from health professionals from other provinces, the U.S., and former healthcare providers. However, we strongly urge the government to also consider it essential that the bill must be broadened to include physicians from other countries as well. There was a time when previous governments recognized that there was a shortage of doctors in Manitoba. The response was to call 1-800-South Africa and recruit many physicians from South Africa. There have been times when Manitoba has seen physicians come here from England, from Egypt, from Syria, and many other countries. Why is this government locking the door to those from other countries while accepting only physicians from the United States and Canada? Madam Speaker, I will be introducing an amendment at the Committee of a Whole stage to address this, and I hope that the government will accept the amendment. And, Madam Speaker, I heard what the minister said in response to the question and answer portion, and while I respect that, nothing prevents Manitoba from taking the lead, take the initiative, and show other provinces and territories we don't always have to follow. We can take the lead as well. This bill will provide individuals to practice under supervision during the pandemic. This supervision must be under an individual who is qualified and who will provide a report on the performance of the individual at the end of the crisis period. Madam Speaker, we believe that individuals who come forward and perform practice under supervision should be enabled and further encouraged. We are living in a time where we really need all hands on deck, as the Premier has said, and if we can implement this safely with supervision, we should be taking all the help that is offered, and that extends to other countries outside of Canada and the US. I think about all the healthcare providers who practiced in their countries of origin, but their education may not have been accredited here in Manitoba. These healthcare workers should be able to practice here at this time where we desperately need healthcare workers under supervision. This government is walking a very fine line in excluding many amazing healthcare professionals here in Manitoba because they're not from Canada or the US. I also think about all the healthcare students we have. There are students who are set to graduate in just a couple of months, and if they are willing to work with supervision during this pandemic, we should work to safely enable this, and once the pandemic is over, to use the reference or references from supervisors toward a path which could lead to full practice in the future. We will be supporting this bill because we believe it is critical at this time, but we do urge the government to further improve it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any further members wishing to speak in debate? Is the House ready for the question? The question before the House is second reading of Bill number 57, the Regulated Health Professions Amendment Act. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. We will now move to the next bill, second reading of Bill number 56, the Family Maintenance Amendment Act. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Families, that Bill number 56, the Family Maintenance Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of the whole.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Justice, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Families, that Bill number 56, the Family Maintenance Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of the whole. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill amends the Family Maintenance Act. It provides the Maintenance Enforcement Program, which is the government program that enforces the payment of child support and spousal or common law support, with greater flexibility to respond to the needs of its clients, in particular those Manitoba families that are experiencing difficulties arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. The Family Law Modernization Act, passed in June of 2019, provided the program with authority to make certain administrative determinations to reduce the need for families to make court applications. Now more than ever, in the light of the increasing demands for the program to assess cases and make appropriate administrative determinations, the program needs to be flexible and transparent in making these determinations. Greater flexibility will enable the program to focus its resources appropriately. The amendments eliminate the current time restrictions respecting inquiries to determine if a maintenance obligation for an adult child remains eligible for enforcement. In appropriate circumstances, the program can cease enforcing support for an adult child, and in some cases to enforce reduced child support. For example, when the eldest child is no longer dependent, but support continues for younger dependent siblings. Providing the Maintenance Enforcement Program with the authority to make requests as necessary will allow the process to be streamlined and free up resources for the urgent work required due to the pandemic, such as payment collection and the processing of administrative suspensions of enforcement. The amendments also provide that when a request is made for an administrative suspension of enforcement, Each party is entitled to a copy of the information submitted by the other party, with any sensitive information deleted. This will ensure that the decisions are made with the best possible information from both parties, and that the parties have access to that information similar to what would happen in a court application. This is particularly important at a time when access to the court is limited. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
A question period of up to 15 minutes will be held. Questions may be addressed to the minister by any member in the following sequence. First question by the official opposition critic or designate. Subsequent questions asked by critics or designates from other recognized opposition parties. Subsequent questions asked by each independent member. Remaining questions asked by any opposition members, and no question or answer shall exceed 45 seconds. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The limits of the ability of the debtor to access information if, in quotations, the frequency of requests for information by the debtor is unreasonable, end quote, Madam Speaker. Can the Minister share what is considered unreasonable and where will this be outlined?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the question. Clearly, we made significant changes to the maintenance enforcement program with changes in legislation just last year. And this is in response to making the program more efficient, more open to Manitobans, and clearly we want to make sure the process is transparent. And by sharing information between the two parties, we think things will move much quicker, more appropriate, and we think it's a better outcome for Manitoba families.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, I think it's important for the Minister to share with the House today, under these extraordinary circumstances, what would be considered unreasonable by the department or by that particular program. And again, Madam Speaker, where will this list of what is considered unreasonable, where will that be outlined?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, Madam Speaker, the process here is to assist Manitoba families. We recognize there are changing circumstances that Manitoba families are facing in view of the pandemic we are facing. Clearly, these changes taking place quite quickly. These provisions will allow staff within the maintenance enforcement program to take that information in, make the assessments, make the determinations based on the information that they get, and moving forward on those assessments in an expeditious manner as things change quite quickly. The member will acknowledge that the previous provision had a 6-month timeline in the previous legislation.
Any further questions? Is the House ready for the question? Oh, sorry, jumping ahead. As there are no further questions, the floor is open for debate. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as you are aware, and as everyone is aware in the chamber, we are sitting today for specifically to deal with COVID-19 legislation, and I would have to submit to the House that I do not see how this Bill 56 specifically pertains to COVID-19. I know that the Minister said that Bill 56 specifically, in quotations, Madam Speaker, and I quote, those families, it will help those families dealing with COVID-19. I'm not sure how Bill 56 is helping with families dealing with COVID-19. In fact, Madam Speaker, I would suggest to the House and I would suggest to the Minister that there have been concerns that have been outlined in respect of child maintenance, and they are as follows, Madam Speaker. As everyone knows, not only here in Manitoba, but certainly across Canada and certainly across the globe, many citizens have lost their jobs. They have been either laid off or fired in many cases where there is no employment, Madam Speaker. And what that translates to in respect of child maintenance is that there are parents who are required to give monthly maintenance in support of their children, but it may be that that particular parent has lost their job. And so nowhere in this legislation do I actually see any measures on how child maintenance is actually going to deal with whether or not a parent is able to pay their monthly maintenance fees to their child. We know, and we have seen many instances of parents co-parenting and trying to find the right way to co-parent during a global pandemic when we are meant to practice social distancing. And so there are many parents that are dealing with that. There are many parents, Manitoba parents, that are dealing with the stress of co-parenting and also trying to mitigate and navigate their children's stress as well. And so to that end, we don't see anything in Bill 56 that would help mitigate any of the financial stresses that families, and in particular parents who have child maintenance orders, are facing. Madam Speaker, we know that when a parent does not pay their monthly child maintenance fee, it has direct consequences on the child that money is meant to support. We don't see any consideration of those scenarios that we know Manitoba families are facing, in fact, today as we sit here. Madam Speaker, I think that it's important to put on the record as well, there's some concerns in respect of what is deemed reasonable, and I will just read this out, Madam Speaker. The explanatory note says, it enables maintenance enforcement officers to make more frequent inquiries to determine if a maintenance obligation for an adult child remains eligible for enforcement. But it also says that it can refuse these requests if the frequency of the request for information by the debtor is deemed unreasonable. We have no sense of what unreasonable means, and that is problematic in the sense that actually there are often times when there are child maintenance conditions and child maintenance fees that are owed to family members, to parents, that one parent has less power more often than not than the other. And for there just to be an open-ended definition of what constitutes something being unreasonable, I suspect is, and I would submit to the House, problematic for that particular parent that may not have the same amount of power in the relationship. So, Madam Speaker, we will be supporting this bill today. However, I do think, Madam Speaker, for the purposes of Hansard and for the purposes of folks that will go back in Hansard to understand the rationale for Bill 56 in the midst of a pandemic, it has not been proven to the House today that, in fact, this does support Manitoba families who have those monthly fees owed to them, or those monthly child maintenance. In fact, I would suggest and I would disabuse the Minister that this, in fact, is in any way, shape, or form related to COVID-19. Miigwech.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Merci, Madame la Présidente. Il y a des difficultés avec ce projet de loi. Une des choses qui a un problème, c'est qu'il n'y a pas de date que ça termine. There is no date at which this, if I'm not mistaken, that this is. There's no end date anticipated, or the idea that this should be lifted at some point. So this is not something clearly that should become a permanent part of our law. That this is, if this is going to be enacted, it needs to be an emergency provision and a temporary provision, and not a permanent one. There are serious concerns about everybody's ability to pay their bills during this crisis, and we certainly don't want the pain to be passed on to mothers or in adult children where a parent has a responsibility, often a father, to care for his children. That being recognized, we want to make sure that this is being done responsibly. Again, there are those reservations that we want to make sure that in particular because when you look at the statistics and the reality that women are often living in poverty, that there have been challenges around maintenance orders in the past, and this shouldn't in any way be seen as being a free pass for those for people who are able to pay and that they don't end up avoiding their parental responsibilities as a consequence. That being said, I do think that in terms of imposing undue financial burdens on people during this crisis, that this bill does appear to do that it does appear to lighten the load. But we would like to see this an end date in sight, an expiration or a sunset clause considered. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Is the House ready for the question? The question before the House is second reading of Bill number 56, the Family Maintenance Amendment Act. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. We will now move to second reading of Bill number 55, the Employment Standards Code Amendment Act. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, second by the Minister of Education, that Bill number 55, the Employment Standard Code Amendment Act, now be read a second time and be referred to the Committee of the Whole.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Finance, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Education, that Bill number 55, the Employment Standards Code Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a Committee of the Whole. The hour being 3 p.m., the House will now be recessed and stands recessed until 4 p.m. And when this matters again before the House, the Honourable Minister will have unlimited time.